Chapter 4 PESTEL Analysis Economic Factors. In this chapter, we cover three main topics. First, we just briefly explain what is economics, and then we will go deep into two key topics. First, the microeconomics, and then is the macroeconomics. Let's begin with the topic of what's economics. The official definitions for economics can be defined in various ways, including the study of how society allocates scarce resources which have alternative uses between competing ends. What does that mean? The basic principles or the rationale behind of economics is about resources, about allocations or allocate scarce resources. Is the key concept behind economics, or the reason why do we have economics in the world? Because first, we have scarce resources and we have competitive or competing ends. That means we have a lot of users that would like to use the resources for their use. And due to scarce resources, we cannot fulfill all demands in the society or the community. So we need to have the economics principle to decide how to allocate the scarce resources. And next is the study of wealth creation. It's about how best of the scarce resources used or utilized. So the overall community or the population can enjoy the creation of wealth based on the best allocation of resources to the highest value users. And it is important to distinguish between two aspects of economics. The first is about microeconomics. Microeconomics is the study of the economic behavior of individual consumers, firms, and industries. That means it's an individual parts contribute to the economic behavior. One example is like the potato chips. If you have $5 to buy it, will you buy it? Okay, it's your own choice or your own decision have to be made in this what we call economic behavior. Or like firms. A firm would like to have a new office for like expansion, so the firms need to make the decision where for new office and how much rent that it would like to pay to the landlord. For the price to pay for the landlord is the rent. It's also the economic behavior of the firms to make. If it can pay like in the central business district, the CBD, it can afford higher prices or higher rent, then it has to make more money in order to rent the space. So it's also an economic behavior to decide whether the firms can have an office or new office in the CBD, or if it cannot to do it because of the lower margin or lower sales revenue that it can generate, then it has to move outside the CBD for lower rate of for lower rent or cheaper price for it. It is also the individual firm economic behavior. And next, macroeconomics. It considers the aggregate behavior and the study of the sum of individual economic decisions. In other words, the workings of the economy as a whole. That means, to make this term simple, macroeconomics, it is the summation of any individual economic decisions. Like, as I said, firms need to have the expansion, need to have the new office, it make the decision whether to have a new office in the CBD or not. And if many firms add them up together, then we have the overall economic decisions by all these individuals, like to have a new office or to move their office from one place to another and have to pay the rent to the landlord. Then it's the price for the overall market for the rent for the office. So it's an economic as a whole, and we will go deep to talk about the macroeconomics principle later. And now we discuss about the microeconomics first. For microeconomics, it focuses on how the individual parts, that is the individuals, firms, or particular industry of an economy make decisions about how to allocate resources. So it's about the make decisions and allocate scarce resources. As mentioned, these individual parts include consumers, firms, and industries. And microeconomics attempts to examine how demand and supply, two major concepts. First is demand, the other is supply. So how demand and supply decisions made by these individuals affect the selling prices of goods and services within an industry or market. So we have demand and supply, and made by the individuals affect the selling prices of goods and services. So here we have selling prices. Of what? Of goods and services. So goods and services, it can be measured by, say, by unit or by the quantity. So here we have demand, supply, and we have prices, and we have goods and services, the quantity as well. So we have some basic elements in microeconomics. First, we go to discuss on demand. There are 4 topics to be discussed under demand. The first topic is individual demand. Next, the market demand, and then the conditions of demand. And the final topic under the demand is elasticity of demand. We'll go them into step by step. So first topic, the individual demand. Individual demand shows how much of a good or service someone intends to buy at different prices. So we have 2 key elements or variables here for individual demand. First, a good or service someone intends to buy. So here is the first one. It's about the quantity, the unit of goods, for example. And the next one is the prices or different prices here. So we have different elements, say good or service someone intends to buy, and prices is B. So we have 2 elements for individual demand. And then we have the demand. The individual demand needs to be effective in that consumers need to have the cash available to buy the goods or services rather than just generally desiring them. What does that mean? It means the demand, should be realistic. That means the consumers have the available cash to buy it. Say, like we just mentioned about the potato chips, $5. Is it $5 affordable, or the consumers can pay for it? If it's too expensive, say $5,000 per pack of potato chips, then it's unreasonable for the general public or for the consumers to buy it. So the demand is not effective then in this way. demand tends to be higher at a low price and lower at a high price for most goods and services. So it is quite simple to explain. For many goods, the price is increased, so the demand for it from the general public should be decreased. On the opposite, if a particular goods, the price is going down, that imply the demand for the goods by the general public should be going up instead of decreased. So here is quite simple relationship between the price and the quantity demanded. When the demand for a good or service changes in response to a change in its price, so we have two terms to explain this change. First, an expansion. An expansion in quantity demand as demand rises when the price falls. So we just mentioned for it. And contraction. So here we have an expansion in quantity demand and also a contraction. A contraction in quantity demand as demand falls when the price increases or the price rises. So here is two major terms that explain expansion and contraction. The key here is the quantity demand, because it is the relationship between quantity demand and the price, not the demand. Okay, we explain it a bit later, because demand is just the demand curve or the demand line on the chart. We have the keywords here is the quantity demand and the price. So here is the chart to explain. It can give you a clear picture on how the relationship between price and the quantity demand. Okay, so the demand, what we talk about demand, the resources allocation for microeconomics, and then the individual demand is shows how much of goods or services someone intends to buy at different prices. So demand means demand curve here. Okay, demand curve. Demand curve illustrates a normal downward sloping demand curve. Okay, here the downward sloping demand curve. And movements along this curve as the price changes would be called a contraction or expansion in demand. Should be quantity demand, okay? Because the quantity demand, I'll just make it simple, quantity demand. So quantity demand, in this case, point A here and point B on demand curve shows different prices and different quantity demand. Given the price at price A and the quantity demand is at QA, and when the price is lower or decreased from PA to PB, so you can see when the price decreases from PA to PB, then the quantity demand will be increased from QA to QB. So we have different terminologies to be remembered here. First, demand or demand curve. Okay, it is the case, or it is the curve shows how much of goods or services someone intends to buy at different prices. In general, because when the price is going up, the quantity demand will be decreased. So it is a downward sloping demand curve. And the movements along this curve as the price change, as we just mentioned here, from PA to PB, the price going down. Okay, so price is falling. Then the quantity demanded will be increased from QA to QB. So it's an expansion in quantity demand or expansion in demand. On the opposite, if the price is going up from PB to PA, then the quantity demand along this curve will move from QB to QA. So it's a contraction in demand because price is rising. For most goods, the lower the price, the higher will be its demand or quantity demand. This is the result of two processes. First, substitution effects. The substitution effect. And second is the income effect. And what is substitution effect? And what is income effect? For substitution effect, this is where a consumer buys more of one good and less of another because of relative price changes. So for example, if two goods are substitutes, a fall in the price of the first will lead consumers to switch some demand to the lower price good, substituting the first good for the second. One example is butter and margarine, because they are substitutes. If the price for margarine is lower or decreased, the demand for the butter will be affected because of substitution effects. They are substitute with each other, the butter and margarine. And for income effects, income effect is where a change in the price of a good affects the purchasing power of the consumer's income. That means a change in their real income. If the price of a good falls, the consumer experiences a rise in their real income and as a result tends to buy more of all normal goods and services. So for example, in the case like the butter, if the butter prices decreased, the money kept by the consumer, they have higher purchasing power because they can buy some more other goods. Because of lower price of the butter, they have more money for them left out. If they just buy the butter, they can buy more of other goods. Then it causes the income effect. So we have the substitution effect, we have the income effect. In a lot of the cases, substitution effect is much more important. So I highlight here, substitution effect is much more important. And for income effect, the impact is relatively weak. Only in the condition like very high price product, say buying a house. If the house price decreased, then the income effect impact will be much larger than others. Not like the butter. Say the butter may be priced at $10, for example. If just 10% decrease, you save $1 for the butter itself, then the impact is very small. But for like a house purchase, the effect will be relatively large as compared to other consumer goods. So it depends, but in general, in most cases, the income effect is quite weak. And next, we talk about market demand. Market demand shows the total amount of effective demand from all the consumers in the market. So it is the summation of all individual demand instead of just standalone or in the individual part. And market demand is usually shortened to demand and represented by a straight line curve on a graph. So it is quite easy to understand because it is the summation of all individual demands to a market demand. And demand curve for most normal goods is negatively inclined, sloping downwards from left to the right, and for the same reasons as individual demand curve. So it is quite straightforward to explain what is market demand. The third topic under demand is conditions of demand. The definition of conditions of demand is, they are factors influencing the quantity demanded with price held constant. We mentioned about the demand curve, which is a downward sloping demand curve. No matter it is linear or a curve, whatever, it is downward sloping demand curve. Just one curve or one line. And for conditions demand, it is a bit different. We keep the price same, we keep the price constant, and see any other factors instead of price, okay? Other factors affecting or influencing the quantity demanded. So in other words, conditions of demand are those factors affecting the demand curve shifting from one side to another. In this chart, we can explain how the change in the conditions of demand on the demand curve and the quantity demanded. We have the price A, which we assume the price is constant, and given the demand curve shift from D1 to D2 because of the conditions of demand change, for example, the population, the income, the taste of the people. Based on this change, just one example is, say, the income level change. The people have the higher purchasing power, so they can buy more goods and services given the same price. So we can see here, this arrow, a change of demand from D1 to D2, and at this price level, the PA, the quantity demanded increased from Q1A to Q2A. Therefore, no price change, but because of the change in the income level in the population, we can see a shift in the demand curve is outward to the right, and such shift is called an increase in demand. On the opposite, if the shift in the demand curve is inward or to the left, such a shift is called decrease in demand. The example, say the income level decreased for the population in a city or in the country, then the shift in the demand curve inward to the left from D2 to D1, given the price levels is same as before, it is PA, the quantity demanded will be decreased from Q2A to Q1A. The change in demand is not the same as the change in the demand due to the price is up or down. Here, an example is when the price is going up, the price is going up from PA maybe to here, let's say PB. The price is going up, and under the same demand curve D1, it implies that the quantity demanded will be shifted from Q1A to lower because of this price is going up. So you can see, given PB, the quantity demanded is changed from Q1A to QB. And if for the price decrease and not the change in the demand curve, just the price decrease, and you can see, say, from PA to PC, here PC, the quantity is going up, the quantity demand is going up from Q1A to Q2A just because of PC, the price is lower. Here is the change in the quantity demanded due to the price. So remember, we have the contraction in demand due to prices going up here, And also we have the expansion in demand due to the price is down. But don't confuse in these two concepts. First, we use this graph or this chart to explain to you the shift in demand, say from Q1 to Q2, due to the fact that the income level changed, the population changed, the population structure changed, and the taste changed, then the demand increased given the same price level. It is the shift in demand, what we call in this case is increased in demand. But in our class, we just mentioned before in our class, the price is going up, then the quantity demand is going down because the price is up. Here we can see this going along the demand curve. Okay, here is two different concepts in the microeconomics for demand. And we will go through four main conditions that affect demand. That is the shift in the demand curve. The first conditions or first factor is income. Changes in income often affect demand. In general, lower direct taxes raise disposable incomes, and other things being equal, it makes consumers better off. So it might cause less demand for necessities and more demand for luxuries. And over time, improvements in the standard of living have led to greater spending on services and leisure activities. And if average wage increases exceed the rate of inflation, consumers will become better off in real terms. That means they have higher purchasing power, so they have greater flexibility and scope in the use of their income. And next, the second condition is taste. Taste in particular areas, for example, fashions, change frequently, and it may make the demand for certain goods volatile. For example, the concerns about health have increased the demand for brown bread and vegetables oil at the expense of white bread and animal fats. And of course, taste can be manipulated by advertising and producers to try to so-called create the markets, particularly for some special goods. For example, air conditioners, which our ancestors survived perfectly well without. And some goods are in seasonal demand, even though they are available all year round because tastes change. And the prices for other goods, sometimes goods may be unrelated, or they may be complements or substitutes for each other. If they are unrelated, for example, they should no effect given the price change. But if they are complements or substitutes for each other, then one good's price increase for one goods may have impact on the other. One example is joint demand. For example, cars and tires. Okay, a car needs tires for running on the road, and they are so-called joint demand products. Once the price of car increases significantly, less people can afford to buy it. It means that the demand for tires is also affected. And another example is substitutes. Just for example, like to say the candies and chocolate. If the chocolate prices increase, given these two are the confectionery or the so-called some items for the goods, they think they are substitute with each other, the price of chocolate increased, then the demand for candies will be increased because it's relatively cheaper than chocolate. So a rise in the price of one will cause an increase in demand for the other in the substitute situation. And the final factor that affects demand is population. An increase in population creates a larger market for most goods. That is shifting the demand curve outwards. And changes in population distribution will also affect demand patterns. If the proportion of old people or the aged group relative to the young group increases, then there will be an increase in demand for products such as wheelchairs and home care products as compared to the demand for, say, nappies or other baby care products. And in the analysis of how the demand and supply model works, we have to remember the distinctions between increase or decrease in demand and expansion or contraction in demand are very important. So remember, if the price change, then the change in the quantity demand is what we call expansion or contraction in demand because of the price change. But if the main conditions, like here in the slide, the income, taste, the prices of other goods, population, all these factors change, then it changed the demand curve to shift the demand inward or outward. The last topic in demand we discuss is elasticity. Elasticity for demand, it generally refers to the relationship between two variables and measures the responsiveness of one variable to a change in another variable. And there are several types which are useful to economists, but now we only discuss two of them. First, the price elasticity of demand, what we call the PED. And the second one is cross elasticity of demand, what we call is XED. For price elasticity of demand, the PED, it is the coefficient of price elasticity of demand, and it is calculated by this formula or this equation. The percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. So here we have the two variables, the quantity demanded and also the price. In our case here, the price is the independent variable, and we would like to see how the price change and the response from the quantity demand change as well. So the dependent variables is the quantity demanded, and the independent variable here is the price. So here is the chart that we explained before. The demand curve here, we just used only one demand curve, and there's no change in the conditions of demand. So we would like to see the price change from PA to PB, and we know the quantity demand change from QA to QB. We would like to see this coefficient or the responsiveness of this price change on the quantity demand. Here is an example that we can explain to you how does it work. Suppose we are currently selling a product at a price of $20 with a resulting demand of 500,000 units per annum. A marketing manager comes to knock your door, and he has suggested dropping the price to $19 and claims the demand will increase or will rise to 550,000 units. So your task is to calculate PED, the price elasticity of demand. And our equation here is to see the percentage change in quantity demand and the percentage change in price. For percentage change in quantity demanded, it is increased from 500,000 to 550,000. So is the equation to find the percentage change is here 550,000 minus 500,000, and then for this number divided by 500,000 and times 100%. So it comes to 10% change. Another variables that we need to derive here is the price, the percentage change in price. It is decreased from $20 to $19. So this $1 change, and $1 divided by 20 times 100%, it comes to a minus 5%. So the price dropped by 5%. And putting these two numbers into our equation, that means the percentage change in the quantity demand divided by the percentage change in the price, that is 10 divided by 5. So it is 2. The percentage change in quantity demand over percentage change in price is 2. Here is the PED for this example, and based on many economics experience, we classify the price elasticity of demand into 3 groups here, or we describe different situations. When the PED, the price elasticity of demand, is lower than 1, here we describe it is relatively inelastic, or what we call the inelastic demand. Examples of inelastic demand, the goods, say tea, sugar, what we describe them as necessities. So when the products or goods or services are necessities for many people or the whole population, like tea, sugar, salt, or butter, for example, and their demand is quite inelastic, or we can explain they are relatively inelastic because the PED is generally lower than 1. If they are equal to 1, we call unit elasticity. So it's not very sensitive to the price or not insensitive to price. But what we call it is inelastic. It means the price change, it is quite not sensitive to the quantity demand. If the price increase say by 10%, but the quantity demand will not decrease by 10%, it's decreased lower than 10%, so like necessities. And in extreme case, what we call is relatively elastic, when the PED is higher than 1. That means when the price increase say 10%, the drop in the quantity demanded will be more than 10% because it's quite sensitive to any price change. Or lower the price by 10%, the volume increase in the goods or services increase by more than 10%. Examples of those elastic goods or services is air travel. If the air flight ticket drop by 10%, the volume, and that means the people buying the flight tickets, will be increased by more than 10%. It's quite common in the air travel industry. And the PED can also be calculated by examining total revenue. And this method is most useful to business people. When considering the goods or services, the demand, whether they are elastic or inelastic, total revenue is a good concept to understand that. If the total revenue increases following a price cut, that means the price drop for the air travel, like the air flight ticket. Then we see much more volume, or much more people would like to buy the air flight tickets for the travel. And price cut by say 5%, but the volume increased by more than 10%, say by 20%, 30%. Then the total revenue, because total revenue is the product from the price and the quantity demanded. So when the price times quantity demanded for the total revenue is increased based on this price cut, that means the quantity demanded increased significantly more than the price drop, so it can help to increase the total revenue. Then it's easy to understand the demand or the quantity demand is increased and the demand is price elastic. On the opposite, if the total revenue increases following a price rise, say the price for tea or sugar increased by 5%, but we cannot see a lot of changes in the quantity demand or the volume. That means the total revenue increase after this price rise. Then we can say that the demand is price inelastic. That means the demand is not significantly, the quantity demand is not significantly lower given the price rise. And there are 5 factors which can determine the price elasticity of demand. And here we would like to explain to you. First, the proportion of income spent on the good. Where a good constitutes a small portion of consumers' income spent, a price change will be unlikely to have much impact. For example, like sugar or tea, the price of them is not significant to any consumers and just a small part of the consumer's income. Even for the price change, like say 10% increase on those sugar price, it's very unlikely to have made a lot of impact in the consumption. Therefore, the price elasticity of demand tends to be low when spending on a good is a small proportion of available income. On the opposite, when a good represents a large portion of the consumer's income, like luxury clothing, the car, the price of them is quite high relatively to the consumer's income. The consumer is said to possess a more elastic demand. So any price drop of a fashion designer brand closes, then maybe it push up some of the demand, because we can say the demand is quite elastic. And next factor is substitutes. If there are close and available substitutes for a product, then an increase in its price is likely to cause a much greater fall in the quantity demanded as consumers buy suitable alternatives. So it depends on, say, which products you are talking about, like a car. If a car is just a very ordinary car, and the people buy it just for their daily use, they will compare the price between different brands or different models. So when one brand or one models the price drops significantly, the people would like to buy it because it's just a substitute of the other car that they are driving. They just look for the lower price. And another example is the demand for a specific breakfast cereal And the demand for it depends not only by the product itself, it also depends by its competitors, like the other brands' products for breakfast cereal, because it's very competitive. Only the unique products can have inelastic demand because the consumer cannot easily find alternatives for those unique products. And for necessities, like just mentioned, like sugar, milk, bread, they tend to be stable and inelastic. On the other hand, like luxury items, the demand is quite inelastic. It is quite elastic because the people, they don't need to buy the luxuries. They have many alternatives for them to choose. So for necessities, in general, demand is quite inelastic. And also habits. When goods are purchased automatically without customers perhaps being fully aware of their price, like milk, for example, milk, the demand is inelastic. It also applies to addictive products such as cigarettes, drugs, because it's habit. So the demand, yes, may be a bit affected. The quantity demand may be a bit lower, but in general, the demand is quite inelastic. That means the price change for cigarettes, the quantity demand will not drop significantly or only slightly affected because it's a habit. It's quite inelastic. And then time. In short run, consumers may be ignorant of possible alternative goods in many markets. So given a short period of time, even though the price is going up, the consumers may not switch to the alternatives because they need to take time to look for it. So they just continue buying certain goods when their prices rise. But such inelasticity may be lessened in the long run as consumers acquire greater knowledge of the markets. They have more information, they know the alternatives or substitutes of the high-priced item, so they will switch to other items once they get the answer for it. So time is also another factor determine the price elasticity of demand. Another topic of elasticity of demand is cross-elasticity of demand, or XED. It measures the sensitivity of demand for one good to changes in the price of another good. For price elasticity of demand, we discussed it's about the sensitivity of the price of a good or a particular good on the volume or the quantity demand of that good. But here, cross-elasticity of demand is from another angle to see the quantity demand for, say, good A from the price changes from good B. So here is the equation or formula for cross-elasticity of demand. The percentage change in quantity demand for good A divided by the percentage change in the price of good B. So we see the independent variables on the price of good B, on how the sensitive on the change of price of good B on the quantity demand of good A. So quantity demand of good A is the dependent variable. Just an example. Suppose the XED of butter with respect to margarine is 1.5 and price of the margarine falls by 6%. So the estimation on the butter demand will decrease, say, by 1.5 times 6%, which is around 9%. Then we see the price change of margarine, say, by 6% decrease. Then the demand for butter will be affected by around 9% based on the equation suggested. When we look back for the PED, the price elasticity of demand, The key consideration was whether the figure was greater or smaller than 1. So we mentioned whether it is elastic or inelastic based on the number or the figure, whether the figure was greater or smaller than 1. But for XED, the key issue is the sign. So whether the elasticity is positive or negative. And here, to summarize, for cross elasticity of demand, the relationship between the substitutes, say good A and good B, they are substitute. The relationship is positive here. And if they are complements, that means good A complement is a complement of good B, then the XED is negative. Going back to our butter example here, the price of margarine falls and the demand for the butter will decrease. So the demand will fall as well. So they are positive. And for complements like cars and toys, when the price of a car, say, increase, the demand for tires will decrease because they are complements. Okay, the car cannot without the tires, for example. So the relationship between cars and tires, they are complements. The cross elasticity of demand is negative. And now comes to question time. Here in this class, I would like to share with you 2 questions for you to think about on elasticity. First question is about the FPLC. It produces a popular product, the F1200, and currently it sells about 15,000 units of this product each year at a price of £55 per unit. The company is now looking at whether it could make higher profits by increasing the sales price. Okay, increasing the sales price to make more profits. And the market research suggests that if it increased the price of this product, the F1200, to £60 per unit, demand will fall to 12,000 units. And in this question, okay, your requirement is to calculate the price elasticity of demand for the product and comment on your results. Just a clue, remember the equation for price elasticity is percentage change in quantity demand divided by the percentage change in price. It measures the sensitivity or the sensitiveness on quantity demanded from the change in price. So here we change the price by how many percent, and then what the quantity demand change in terms of the percentage. So here is your requirements to do this in-class question. The second question is about country C. The government of country C provides free medical treatment to all its citizens. But for more wealthy persons of citizens, a small charge is made if they need medication. And the government has recently decided to increase this charge by a moderate amount to reflect the increased cost of the medicines. So in this question, here, key terms is increasing cost of the medicines, so they have to increase the price. And it asks you whether the effects is on this medical or the price charge increase will have any impact on the demand for medicine within country C. And the clue here I would like to show you is on the price elasticity demand. It is calculated by the total revenue in some case. So do you think that whether the price increase for the medicine will have the total revenue increase, or on the other hand, the total revenue decrease by this price change? If you think the total revenue increase following a price rise, then the demand is price inelastic. On the other hand, if you think the price rise would cause the total revenue decrease, then the demand is price elastic. So here you think about whether the medicine is a price elastic product, the demand is price elastic, or medicine is price inelastic.